Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Inside Scoop. And we are here today with Jamie Kress and Justin Patton. And what we're going to talk about today is what's going on, not only just with retail, but RFID in particular. And RFID has become a hot topic. I'm hearing about it more and more. I think retailers are really looking for other ways to help address their retail theft problems. And RFID is definitely becoming closer to the top of the list of solutions they should be looking at, if not at the top of the list. So before we kick it off here with some questions that I have for both Jamie and Justin, I'd like, Jamie, if you could start us off with a little introduction of yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Jamie Kress. I'm responsible for the RFID business for Sensormatic for North America. Been in the RFID space for almost 20 years now, from the very first pilots we ran in North America all the way now to what we're seeing with global rollouts. So I started off more so in the account management side, and now I oversee the activities throughout Sensormatic with RFID in North America.
Awesome. So we'll dig in a little bit more about RFID with you, Jamie, in a little bit. But I want to kick it over to Justin. Justin, it looks like you're on campus at Auburn.
Yes, I am. I'm in the lab.
And you are in a lab. So
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what you do there.
So my name is Justin Patton. I've been running the RFID lab for 19 years. So we started this lab in 2005 at the University of Arkansas, and we moved it down here to Auburn in 2014. So I've had the privilege of working with hundreds of students from engineering and business and human sciences and animal science and humanities and everything you can think of with technology adoption, particularly with RFID and even some new serialized stuff now too. So we focus more on use case and business value, but we do a little bit of development work on the robotic side and things as well. So it truly is a collaborative learning lab space with a lot of new faces every few semesters. So we just finished graduation last weekend, which was RFID enabled. So it's a never a dull moment, always something new to see.
Excellent. So instead of getting your diploma, you just got like an RFID chip and you had to pick it up later.
Kind of, in a way. So this actually came out of COVID, but what they do is when they go to graduation, they get their little graduation invitation has an RFID tag on it. So when they walk across the stage, their name shows up on the Jumbotron in the arena because there's an RFID reader that reads it, and they can get their photo with their name, and they can go in any order. So it's been very popular. So I guess we're going to do that forever now. So
wow, that is excellent. I was just at a graduation this last week, and I tell you, my neck still hurts from trying to see where my graduate was in line. That would have been very helpful. And congratulations, by the way, on staying in the SEC. That's a huge achievement. Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. And like I said, I'm excited to talk about RFID a little bit more in depth. But first, what I'd like to do, Jamie, is if you could kind of bring us up to speed with the growth of RFID. I know it's been huge in apparel, but kind of talk to us a little bit about some other sectors that it's growing in.
Yeah. So, when you think about how RFID started, 20 some years ago, obviously the technology has been around much longer than that in lots of other industries. In retail, started really with Walmart and case and pallet, and certainly Justin can talk about the beginning of that. We saw early on the use case was on inventory accuracy. That was where really the groundswell started. We didn't see it really start to pick up activity until the onset of omnichannel, and having that inventory accuracy in the store was paramount. And we found these retailers who were saying, it's fantastic that we can leverage the inventory in our stores. We're selling more than we used to. We are making better leverage of the inventory that's sitting in our stores than just having to replenish from the warehouse. But unfortunately, as soon as we go to sell the merchandise in the store, we find out it's not really there. And we really started to struggle with our inventory accuracy. So that was the first big uptick in RFID as a real mainstream technology in retail. And at that time, most of the retailers were asking me, and probably Justin and others, can you prove that RFID works? And that was the switch, I think, where it went from being prove that it works to help me understand how it works in our environment. How does it work for us as a retailer? And so omnichannel started it. And I think other industries, especially after COVID, many retailers hadn't done an annual physical count of their inventory for
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3 years. So what was always a problem with inventory accuracy was compounded by COVID, because inventories were even worse and they didn't know where their inventory was at all in their supply chain. So
Mm-hmm.
I think when you heard stories in the press about, how retailers who had already invested in RFID were able to leverage that and maintain inventory accuracy, which helped their omni-channel, which helped them to have the right levels of inventory in the stores, that was really, what really kind of spurred the industry on even further. And then it began to expand from apparel to the other categories, and retailers who carried many categories like Walmart and others, department stores, started saying, we've seen the success in apparel, it's validated, it's proven. Now we can begin to leverage it in other categories. We just need to make sure we're choosing the right tags, putting it on the right products in the right places, et cetera, which is where the Auburn lab really played a major role as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I know over the years that there's, the first adopters within retail organizations have not always been the LP team, right? Sometimes it's been operations, the merchants. Have you seen that changing at all? Has that evolved to where the LP is more of the driver behind adopting RFID programs? Or is it a mix still?
Yeah, I would say, it's interesting. When we did our first deployments in apparel, it wasn't really a thought to bring the loss prevention use case to the table initially. They were trying to prove inventory accuracy. They were focused on the operations of the store. And when you hear folks like Joe Cole from Macy's talk in public settings, he will say, one of the things looking back in time, he wishes he could have been at that table early on, so that the decisions they made in their program weren't necessarily focused on LP, but at least were considering those LP use cases. So I would say the conversations I'm in now, LP is at the table. It may not be the first use case they tackle, but it's in their mind that that's where they want to get to, because the benefits are so big on the LP side.
Right. And it sounds to me like within the last, you mentioned COVID and what's changed there. Justin, over at the lab, what do you see has been evolving in the lab over the last 3-5 years?
3 to 5. Yeah. I think Jamie's kind of hit it on the head. COVID exposed a lot of problems that we had in the supply chain. And essentially what the lab does and what RFID does is it helps with, it's all a game of trust. Okay. So everyone has an inventory system. Everyone has their on hand counts. Everyone has a pretty good idea of how accurate it is or how much they trust it. And I think a lot of times we over trust our inventory systems, especially in retail and warehouse operations. And I think what happened is COVID exposed a lot of holes in that. So especially when we had retailers that were being forced to move into a buy online, pick up in store or ship from store, we probably went through 4 or 5 years of evolution in 1 year. Just trying to get those services up and going. And they were finding real quickly that their inventory systems were not able to support that. And what that translated to is for customers, and I'm pretty sure every single person who's listening or watching this can relate, is if you have ever done more than one buy online, pick up in store or ship from store order, I assure you that someone has probably messed up at least one item in those orders. So
yes, I can attest to that.
yeah, and our expectations as consumers are pretty low. We kind of go into it just assuming that something's probably going to be a little bit wonky by the time we get to the end of this, which that's not where we need to be. We want to get that trust much higher. And I think what we do in the RFID space is it's not all about the magic RF side of these things. Really, there's 2 core things that I think RFID helps with that we haven't had in the past. One is it provides everything with a serialized identity. So that's a big deal, especially in the LP world, because as soon as you give something a name, as soon as you give it an individual identity, you increase its value, because now you can track it, you can trace it, you can imply ownership. There's so much more that you can do with that. And I think the second thing is it allows us to capture the data more frequently with less effort. So instead of having somebody wander around the shelves with a barcode scanner, scanning things over and over again for hours, you can use a handheld or an overhead or something like that, and you can take inventory on tens or hundreds of thousands of items very quickly. So when you combine that ability to acquire the data more regularly with the ability to provide a serialized identity, those are the two things that are being used to offset some of those holes and deficiencies that we've seen in the supply chain with coming out of COVID and moving forward.
So how does it work with at Auburn at your lab? Do you sort of work together with the solution providers, like with a Sensormatic, and sort of go through use cases to see, where things can be improved, where the efficiencies are? Talk to us a little bit about that relationship.
Mm-hmm. So for the relationship with the solution providers, like Sensormatic's a great example. We've been with Sensormatic we've been working together for say 15 plus years now. So a long time. And in that world, it's more about they'll have solutions or concepts or ideas that we help to show to people. Like the lab's pretty large. Right now, it's about 13,000 square feet. The new lab we're moving to is about 50,000 square feet. So it's quite a bit bigger. But we have tours at the lab, I'd say daily, usually actually right now, more than one a day. And that is with everyone. A lot of times it's industry executives or partners that are coming in because they want to learn. They have a specific issue, like they're having shrink problems, they're having inventory problems, and they're looking for solutions, or they have a solution that they're interested in and they want to see how it may fit back into those. So one thing we do is we work on kind of showcasing a lot of different types of RFID innovation here. And then I think the second thing is as Jamie pointed out, is serves as a little bit of a R&D point, so that when you have end users or multiple end users that are having a problem, we can do a little bit of dev work to figure out if there's a solution that may fit, or how do we get them together to talk about that and message that, I guess.
Right.
But
So that kind of actually segues over to another question I had back to Jamie, but I'm sure, Justin, you can chime in on this too. When you think about the challenges that they face when retailers are actually implementing RFID, right? I know your lab would be a great place to go and kind of test the waters a little bit, but when someone does jump in and they decide to implement, what are some of the challenges that they run up against, Jamie, if you could help out with that?
Yeah, well, I think the first challenge, and we've worked with Auburn on this as well, is keeping them focused on the goals they want to get out of an RFID program. That's really critical. And the retailers who have done it most successfully have kept themselves very focused on that. What's both great and challenging with RFID is it solves so many different problems. And as soon as a lot of different stakeholders in a retail environment hear of what it possibly can do for them, you have a lot of people saying, oh, I want it to help the customer experience, help me out understanding what's going in and being sold from fitting rooms. Well, I want it to improve my inventory accuracy. Well, I want it to improve my shrink numbers. And so you have lots of people saying, gosh, I've read about this. Now it can finally help my problem. So I think the number one thing that one of the first mistakes retailers make is trying to boil the ocean. So you can say there's a laundry list of benefits that this technology will do for you, but let's focus on the top 3 for this pilot or this rollout, and you can always add use cases. So going back to what we talked about earlier, inventory accuracy, there's a lot to do in an inventory accuracy program to make sure you're selecting the handhelds that make the most sense for the stores, to understand what all categories you're going to use, to understand, are you going to go really broad across an entire store and tag everything in that store, or are you going to go across multiple stores in a given category and really understand the impacts of using RFID in that way? So there's a lot that goes into just inventory accuracy alone. And then you can tackle, do I want to integrate RFID into my point of sale? Do I want to leverage fixed infrastructure, maybe with transition doors between back and front? Do I want to look at fixed infrastructure at the exits for both shrink and ORC? So there's a lot of decisions that can be made, but it's important to kind of knock down each of the benefits and be really good at that one before moving on to the next one.
So we think about, I'm sure a lot of these use cases, right? It all comes down to, you need to impact sales positively, whether that's reducing shrink, making sure that we have the item in the store. How does RFID impact the customer experience? Like, what's in it for me as the customer, right?
Yeah.
What's it?
There's a lot of ways, and Justin probably sees a lot more of those because they have great demonstrations in the lab. I'll tell you from my experience, what we're seeing in the real world environment, I think probably the most expansive one we've seen has been around fitting room. Just because I think consumers are so enraptured with the fact of being able to go into a fitting room, not leave that fitting room, being able to communicate with sales associates and say, do you have this shirt instead of in a blue and a green, or instead of in a large and a medium, and utilize RFID for that. And then once that customer has finished that experience, the retailer can go back and look at the data and say, oh, well, I see everything that person tried on in the fitting room that day. I see what went through point of sale. And I can start to look at trends. Is there a fit problem? This item has been tried on in all of our fitting rooms 40% more than other items, but it's not converting. So there might be a fit problem. So the key is look at those customer engagement, customer experience use cases, but tie them to an ROI where you can improve the business side of it. And I think we've seen it with fitting rooms. We've seen it with in-store displays, being able to hold up a shirt to a mirror, not even in the fitting room, and see what other sizes and colors that item comes in that's actually in stock at that store or in stock at a nearby store that could be sent to the customer. I would say that tends to be the leading customer engagement, but there's a lot more. I'm sure, Justin, you probably see a lot more of those than I typically do.
Customer experience, I think in RFID, if everything's working the way it's supposed to be, it's kind of seamless and invisible. I mean, it's an invisible technology. It's radio waves, it's radio based. So, one thing to keep in mind is in 2005, when RFID in retail really kicked off, very few retailers maintained separate inventory from front room to back room. They just maintained a full store inventory. And nowadays that seems pretty wild. I mean, most retailers have very specific inventory levels and they use that to monitor replenishment from back to front. And a lot of that early RFID research really focused on that piece. But what that shows up as is more in stock and better in stock. So you get better opportunities to purchase, faster and better fulfillment for BOPUS and pick up in store, and then less canceled orders because things that should be there don't exist there. So a lot of that stuff is not necessarily in your face. It's not necessarily the customer touching and engaging and interacting with the RFID tag. But I think we'll see more of that in the near future. With the concept of a multi-sensor, multi-signal, or sensor fusion, whatever people want to call it. But the idea for, I think, a retail tech that's coming together very quickly is we're not looking at just RFID, or we're not looking at just computer vision, or we're not looking at just new generation 2D barcodes. We're combining all of that stuff together into better customer experience. So you see this with some of the automated store concepts where they would automatically assign items that are picked to a customer. And a lot of those, like when Amazon was doing Just Walk Out before they switched over to the shopping cart model, it was a combination of a CV and RFID. There's a lot of those coming soon. And I think you're going to start seeing more of those at the point of sale as well. But in the near future, everything is moving to serialized barcode, probably in the next 3 to 4 years. And it sounds weird to say, but serialized barcode is really the future of RFID, because as soon as we get everything on a serialized barcode and a serialized identity, that forces everyone to update all their inventory management systems at the store and the warehouse to handle serialized data. And then we can just pump tons of that stuff through there with RFID tagged items and through some of these other sensor capture channels. So the future is coming very quickly, where a consumer actually can do it with Puma today, because they're already linked together, where the RFID tag on the box is the same identity as the QR code on the box that can be linked back together with some type of a customer experience versus an in-store use case or application. So that's all coming together really quickly, and that will change a lot of the ways that we shop.
Stefanie, if I want to add one quick thing to what Justin said, which I think is often overlooked, is he did a great example of explaining one of the best examples of how RFID has helped the consumer is that products are in stock on the sales floor when a customer goes in to shop for those. That's a great example. Oftentimes, I obviously jumped to the more overt example of a fitting room. But I think we oftentimes lose sight of the impact RFID has on the associates in the store or some of the folks in the back office, and how RFID has improved their day-to-day activities. You think about the day of an associate in a store, especially now when labor is such a focus in the store and they have a million tasks to do. They have to help customers. They have to stock merchandise from back to front. In many cases, they have to also serve as a somewhat of an LP professional. And so what I love about RFID is it gives them the tool to make all of those jobs a lot easier. They don't have to create a list of what to replenish in the morning. They get a list that says, these are all the things you need to replenish, and they're in the back room for you to replenish. And now that we're talking about loss prevention, we're hearing the same thing from the loss prevention professionals. Most retailers have very small investigative teams with very limited labor to be chasing down all of these potential thefts in their stores. RFID allows them to look at real cases with validated data showing items that are leaving the store, comparing that to items that did not go through point of sale. So I think the impact that RFID has on the associates, both store associates and corporate associates, is the one customer experience item that we oftentimes lose sight of.
Yeah, I'm just feeling, as we're talking, my brain is spinning about all the different areas of the business that RFID could touch, right? And I'm thinking about all the data that is just descending upon us. Are we seeing a use case for AI to help parse that data? And because I'm sure one human being, let's say an investigator or an analyst, is not going to be able to get through every single data point. Do we see a use case for AI? Maybe it already exists. What do you think, Justin?
I haven't really found one. My experience with AI has been limited, and we've tried a few things along, but I think it's still a little bit more of a toy on the operations side of the house, because it's more for, you see a lot of the natural language processing stuff and things like that too. But I think what's happened is a lot of the projects that we're using, and we as an industry we're using for data analytics and machine learning, they just kind of switch the name to AI based, which is the same basic thing. So you get a lot of data from a lot of systems, but I find that operationally most folks have a limited ability to act on even limited data sets because of scale and labor and things like that. So I think some of that's a little bit more down the line in the future. It's helpful to know what things went and where they came from, but generally it's either linear or something's gone really, really wrong. And so far, I think we have a long way to go to figure out why all those things go wrong, I guess.
Right.
So, Jamie, I don't know about you, man.
I would agree. I mean, we hear the question in every customer meeting, what are you doing with AI? What are you doing with machine learning? And I think I agree that machine learning is probably more of a focus. I think we utilize machine learning in our development and especially how we're optimizing some of our hardware solutions. I think the combination of computer vision with what you get out of RFID is actually really exciting, and I think we're seeing more of a focus on that, because when you start to compare, and this isn't necessarily computer vision, it's more just video, but when you start to look at the advantages of combining video to RFID data in the store, a lot of exciting things, especially on the loss prevention side. But I think computer vision and RFID, there's a lot of excitement right there. But I think people generally use the term AI in the industry, especially those of us who maybe aren't super technical, as a all-encompassing, definition of those types of technologies.
Yeah, it's truly become a buzzword. I know that. And not everything is AI, to your point too, Justin. And I am excited though about the computer vision piece. Is that something that you're testing down in the lab as well?
Oh yeah, that's a big deal. So that's been something that's been going for a while. Actually, back to when we were in the University of Arkansas days, we used to work with a group there that would do called CAST, and they actually had a TV show called Time Scanners where they would go out there and scan the pyramids and the Colosseum and stuff like that and make 3D models of those. And I think where that's evolved to in the retail space is trying to learn how to do as-builts of retail store space and warehouse space, but also building models of items. So I'll give you a great example of how a computer vision will work together with RFID. Let's say you have a shopping basket full of items, okay? And let's say that there's 40 items in that shopping basket. Generally, if you know what your items are that you're selling in your store, you have some kind of an idea of how big they are, what size they are, what volume they are, things like that too. So if I have that shopping basket and I push it up to an RFID reader and it reads and it says, hey, I see, 35, 36 items here in this basket that are RFID tags are picking up. And then if the CV system says, hey, I see, 10 or 20 or something because it can only see what's on the top, you cross compare the two and say, do I see any stuff that wasn't on the other? And then the nice thing about the camera system is it can look at the overall volume in the space and says, does everything that I've identified here add up to the total volume of that space? If it doesn't, there's still some stuff there and we need to investigate. So what you find is that each system knows what it knows, but you can use the advantages or some of the way the tech works in each system to understand if there's a gap that the other one doesn't see, and they truly become very symbiotic. We call it peanut butter and jelly. Like one's great at counting things, the other is great at giving a specific location of things. You put those two together and you get some really, really strong results. And I think that's what we're really learning now. But each has the same challenge, which is the upfront setup of the item. With RFID, you got to put tags on all that stuff at the factory. And with the computer vision system, you have to train those on what that item is and what the model of that item is. It takes a little bit of time and effort on both sides. But once those things are done right, you can have some awesome, store systems. And that's really where that customer experience you talked about starts really kicking in as well. So we're not quite there yet. I don't think there's any retailer that's really cracked that code, but I think we're right there on the cusp. And in the next few years, it's going to be pretty great.
Well, that actually kind of takes me to our question here as we wrap this up. Where do you think we're headed? I mean, Jamie, if you had to get your crystal ball out, what do you see in store for us in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, great question. I think, we are continuing as a company to focus on ORC, to focus on how we can leverage the areas of Sensormatic that is our history. So, we have a history in loss prevention. We are working on computer vision, like some of the things that Justin mentioned. And then we have a strong background in RFID. I think the growth that we're seeing is how can we apply all three of those to get the biggest benefit for our customers, especially as we grow outside of apparel and those other use cases. I think we're seeing, we are now making the rounds, talking to retailers about a new RFID offering that we have called Shrink Analyzer, which is really geared towards investigators using RFID data, using video to help them close larger cases more quickly and make more use of the staff in their LP departments. We had, as a side note, we had an event that we hosted down at Auburn last fall, where it was our second annual, we called it a Smart Exit Workshop. And it was to bring in retailers who had put in similar infrastructure at their exits, who had either been thinking about it, had been piloting it, or had rolled it out. And there's several retailers in all those different phases. Our first one we did 2 years ago, we had a room full of about 6 different folks who were piloting this. We reached out to some of our customers last year, and we had 30 retailers immediately respond. We would like to come and talk about loss prevention, talk about how you can utilize RFID. So based on that response, based on what we've seen over the last 3-4 months in the reaction to this Shrink Analyzer solution from the investigators and the LP community, I would say that is where we see significant growth over the next 12 to 18 months.
Excellent. What about you, Justin? Any crystal ball predictions?
Well, I think y'all live in the world of LP, and I'm a tourist through it, I guess, on the RFID side. But I see a lot of LP projects are focused on exit and customer theft, and I think that's an issue. It's a big issue, especially it's become a bigger problem now that there's less enforcement. But there's a lot of stuff that is wrong before it even gets to the store. So, there's a saying in retail, shrink doesn't happen until you get to the store. Well, that's not right. Like if we're looking at a retail store that's looking at 55% PI accuracy, which is pretty well the average across the industry on apparel, that didn't all happen at the retail store. You don't have customers just walking in stealing 5 packs of socks all day, every day. Like that's not kind of how that works. There's a lot of assortment issues and upstream supply chain issues and shrink and things like that. And we haven't really cracked those use cases yet. Like RFID on Wikipedia looks great because you put it on at the factory and you read it down at the store, and there's all these points in between the supply chain. But in reality, we're at the store and we're at the front of the supply chain, but we're not at that full point in between. And that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for shrink and loss monitoring. We guesstimated about 600 to 700 billion dollar opportunity with shrink identification and prevention in the supply chain when you add up counterfeiting and a diversion and some of those things in there. Well, based on some of the numbers from NRF, that's wild, and it's getting worse. And I think that there's a lot of tools that need to be put in place to provide that full chain traceability, because going back to the beginning, if it does not have an identity, it's hard to track. If you're just trying to track things by quantity, it's very easy for things to fall off the truck or be diverted or disappear or be substituted with something else, because the bad hides in the crowd with the good. As soon as we start providing everything in identity through RFID and these other technologies, it makes it much, much harder. Things don't fall off the truck anymore. We say, oh, we didn't see these two items after yesterday, or these two things showed up and we've never seen them before. So there's a huge amount of power that comes with that ability to provide and see that identity. And it's just a matter of people learning how to use that in their different use cases and learning to trust that new technology and those new data sources that they're going to get.
I love that. I think, coming from LP, we always talked about controlling what you can control, right? And that's operations, it's supply chain. Those are all things we can control if we get the right tools in place, RFID being one of them. So I just want to thank you both very much for your time today. Looking forward to seeing you both soon. Justin, do you ever go to the NRF conference? Or
I do. I try to every year when I can.
All right. Well, hopefully I see you there. I know Jamie will be there, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, let's talk some more about RFID when we see each other.
Absolutely. Great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. And we'll talk to everyone again soon on an upcoming podcast. Have a great day.